Hello everyone, welcome back to the show. My name's Dan, this is Exploder, and I'm here with another episode just for you. In this episode, I want to talk about a particular thing. I like doing episodes where it's just going on one topic and just really sticking on it. I've noticed I've done that a lot lately, and it works, so I'm going to keep doing it. In this episode, I want to talk to you about the man we all know as Goldust, Dustin Rhodes. Dustin Patrick Runnels was born April 11, 1969, the son of the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. After following his father into the wrestling business and taking the name Dustin Rhodes, he would make stops in championship wrestling from Florida, Japan for the All Japan Wrestling, USWA, and even a late 80s stint in WCW, teaming with Kendall Windham as the Texas Broncos. But his first national exposure would come in 1990 in the WWF, teaming with his father against Ted DiBiase and some jobber named Virgil. I don't know. The Rhodes family would lose the match and both leave the company shortly thereafter. In 1991, he returned to WCW as the Natural Dustin Rhodes, which, as an aside, is sort of that gimmick they give somebody when they have literally no other ideas on what to do with them. The idea behind it is that he's unnatural in the ring, and I get it, but they did the same thing for Butch Reed, whose prior gimmick was being called the Natural Butch Reed. I don't know. Dustin Rhodes would team with Barry Windham and go after the WCW Tag Team titles, held by the Enforcers, the team of Arn Anderson and Larry Zbyszko. When Windham got injured, say that 5 times fast, he was replaced by Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, who would actually still win the tag team titles together. He would then they would win the belts and then lose them, and then he win the tag team titles again, this time with Barry Windham as intended, and even get 2 title runs with the WCW United States title back when that used to mean something. He would stay with the company. He would appear in War Games alongside Sting, Davey Boy Smith, and the legend known as the Shockmaster. He would then come in and face the Stud Stable, which was run by Colonel Robert Parker, Robert Fuller, Tennessee Lee, whatever you want to call him. One of the most vivid things, and he would actually bring in and face off against Terry Funk, who's part of the Stud Stable, and he would face off against him and bring in actually Dusty Rhodes, who was a famous rival of Terry Funk. One of the first things I remember, one of the first vivid memories I have, as another aside, of WCW was I'm watching WCW Saturday Night, which used to be the franchise show before Nitro came along in '95, and there was a thing where Ming Haku, but Ming was the bodyguard for Colonel Robert Parker, and they had his hair down really close to his head, and he wore these sunglasses and a suit, and he was a really big stoic guy, and he would do the Tongan Death Grip. And there was one where he had the Tongan Death Grip on Dustin Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes comes in with a chair, and I don't mean like a steel folding chair. I mean like the old wood ones, the old wooden folding chairs where the seat like folds so the whole thing's flat. And vividly, I remember Dusty Rhodes slamming that thing over Ming's head, and the seat breaks out and it hangs over Ming's head like a picture frame, right? And I remember vividly, A, Ming does not sell it, and B, his sunglasses don't even come off. And if I can find that clip somewhere, I swear I'll share it with you, because that's amazing to me. His glasses don't move, he doesn't sell it. There's a chair hanging off his neck, and all he does is he looks over at Dusty Rhodes, and then he puts him in the Tongan Death Grip. So he has both of the Rhodes family in the Tongan Death Grip right there in the middle of the ring. And it was just one of those things, it's a small thing, but those details are so vivid in my mind. And to his credit, Dustin Rhodes was a top guy, was a good mid-card guy up through March of 1995, when he was fired from WCW in a very WCW way. That I will explain. Storyline going into Uncensored 1995 was that the Natural Dustin Rhodes was being harassed by a bald heckler in the front row, who would later be known as the Blacktop Bully, which, if you're keeping track, was Barry Darsow in gimmick number 4 of, well, never mind. The two would have a King of the Road match, which was performed and shot on the back of a slow-moving tractor trailer the day before. Think if Henry O. Godwin got the idea to build his own cage match. That's what it would look like. Anyway, both Darsow and Rhodes would bleed during the match, adding to the realism of 2 men fighting on the back of a truck in front of a film crew where one of them was named the Blacktop Bully. They bled with the understanding that the agent of the match, Mike Graham, had cleared it with whoever he had to clear it with, which, being WCW, probably meant he had to ask the guy who ran the mailroom in CNN Towers. WCW had a policy against bleeding at the time, yet, despite the fact that this match was taped the day before, they aired it anyway, then fired everyone involved for breaking the bleeding rule, because WCW. Don't ask me. While Darsow and Graham would be rehired down the line, Rhodes would end up taking a different direction, let's say, and become Goldust in the WWF. An Oscar statue would sexually harass his opponents and play mind games. He debuted at In Your House 4, defeating Marty Jannetty because everyone did at the time. They'd play the character off as playing psychological warfare, and he was androgynous, a term both Rhodes and JR admitted they didn't know the meaning of until they were told about it. But ultimately, the character was a very hyped up version of exotic Adrian Street, a clearly flamboyant, borderline homosexual gay character whose finisher was gay panic. I mean the curtain call. My mistake. He was joined by his director, Marlena, who was his then wife, Terry Runnels. Marlena was a former Alexandra York of the York Foundation back in WCW, something that I've covered in a previous episode on WCW factions. Check that one out. And at one point, again, small detail, but this has been confirmed by multiple people, at one point there was talk of having Marlena with a prosthetic penis show up in the lining of her dress, implying, sort of with the subtlety of a jackhammer, that she was transsexual. I don't know what they were thinking. This was 1996, by the way, so I don't know what the hell they were thinking. It never went that far, but I wanted you to have that mental image. If I have to think about it, you have to think about it. Goldust was a complete departure from Dustin Rhodes and the WWF as a whole. The character was being controversial, shocking, and all kinds of weird. They actually at one point had to pull him back due to heat from the press and special interest groups like GLAAD. His first program was against Razor Ramon, in which the Golden One would seem to sexually harass and or stalk the bad guy, even going as far as having a heart with the word Razor painted on his bare chest, which Razor Ramon himself reacted in disgust to. So again, psychological warfare, gay crush, I'm not sure where that line was, but this got weird. Again, I wish I was making all this up. Hall was reportedly uneasy with the angle, and their proposed Miami street fight between Goldust and Razor Ramon was replaced with a Hollywood backlot brawl between Goldust and Roddy Piper. This match turned out way better than it had any right to be, as Piper was the acting WWF president at the time, a year removed from having awful matches in the WWF and only 6 months away from having awful matches in WCW. The match was just that, a brawl, which saw Goldust run over Piper, where he popped up on the hood and rolled off the car. Piper of this time is in his 40s, with an artificial hip, so let's just keep that in mind. Then they got into a high-speed chase from the backlot to Anaheim, which is where WrestleMania is being held that year. The high-speed chase was actually just the O.J. Simpson white Bronco chase from a couple years prior. No, I'm not joking. That ended up with Piper beating Goldust in the middle of the ring and stripping off his gold bodysuit to reveal the kind of women's clothing you wish your girlfriend would wear and fear that your mom might have at some point. Following this feud, he would go on to feud with the famed orator Ahmed Johnson, where he gave Ahmed some overly enthusiastic mouth-to-mouth, to which Johnson replied by destroying the backstage area like the Incredible Hulk on bath salts. He would even win the Intercontinental title, face the likes of The Undertaker, Savio Vega, The Ultimate Warrior, and even Mark Marrow. Yes, that's that hero, Mark Marrow. They even toyed with a, lesbian storyline in the WWF in 1996 by having it seem that Marlena was flirting with Mark Marrow's valet and real-life wife, Sable. They backed off immediately and turned it into Goldust sending Sable flowers, gifts, etc. as trying to get her to become his second manager? I don't know. Goldust would eventually feud with Hunter Hearst Helmsley, where the future Triple H would hit on Marlena, and that would lead to the introduction of Chyna as Helmsley's bodyguard. She debuted by swinging Marlena around in her arms like a slow kid with a wrestling buddy. This turned Goldust into a babyface for the first time, so he wasn't really this psychological weirdo anymore. He was a sympathetic babyface, which was different for the character, and honestly, it was a good change. He would later join, famously, he'd be in the main event of Canadian Stampede, where he would join Steve Austin, the Legion of Doom, and Ken Shamrock against the Hart Foundation. And everyone knows who the Hart Foundation is. I hope you do. It'd be in a 5-on-5 at Canadian Stampede, where the U.S. faced their bitter rivals, Canada. It was 1997. Just go with it here. He would then enter a feud with Brian Pillman, where Pillman alluded to the fact that he and Marlena, or Terry, dated in WCW prior to her and Dustin getting married. They even went as far as have Pillman win the services of Marlena for 30 days. Now, at this point, they acknowledged who Dustin Rhodes was. They acknowledged that Marlena was his wife. And during this 30 days, they got weird. It got really, this was probably Russo stuff. This got dark. They had him dress Terry up, or Marlena up, in some really, the intention was slutty gear. And it made Pillman look like a scumbag, and it was implying that there was some kind of weird sexual relationship that one of them didn't want to be in, I guess. This got very dark. I think this was one of those things where the whole 90 days thing, that stuff's been done before, but this was done like really far. They went the whole 9 yards in this, and it was maybe a few yards too far. The angle was supposed to culminate where Marlena would, the end of the 30 days would come up, and Marlena would face off, Marlena would be free, and Goldust would face Brian Pillman in a match at Bad Blood in October of 1997. Unfortunately, and this is the pro wrestling business, this is how weird sometimes things get, Brian Pillman died the day before the Bad Blood pay-per-view, and again, I wish, there's nothing funny to say about that. That's just a fact. He died. He died the Saturday before the pay-per-view on Sunday, where he was supposed to face Goldust. So the angle ended when literally one of the performers passed away. With this, wow. Shortly after this, JR did one of his famous sit-down interviews with Dustin Rhodes, who was not wearing his Goldust gear, and Marlena. Now, they were talking about themselves as a couple, because by this point, we're talking about reality. We're not talking about Goldust, we're talking about Dustin Rhodes. We're not talking about Marlena, we're talking about Terry. During it, Dustin Rhodes turned full heel and broke up with Marlena/Terry on live television. This was also when their real-life marriage was breaking apart, because it was the Attitude Era. Goldust then did the impossible. He got weirder, changed his name to the artist formerly known as Goldust, because Prince had done the same thing around this time, and nothing says wrestling like a small man from Minnesota wearing high heels and a velvet jumpsuit. He brought back Luna Vachon to manage him, and he started wearing increasingly strange costumes, whether it was the first time he dressed up as a Christmas tree, lights and all, or when he was the New Year's baby, or the times where he stuffed a polka dotted shirt and went as his own father, the American Dream, or Vader dust, or Marilyn Manson dust, or the green bodysuit, spiked bra, and ball gag getup that was usually saved for Vince McMahon's shame closet. Take your pick, it was all super weird. Then as Goldust seemed to reach peak weird, he just stopped. During a memorable segment, at least to me, Dustin Rhodes came out on the Raw set one night and threw his Goldust gear into a conveniently positioned hobo barrel fire, renouncing the Goldust character and saying Goldust died that night. It was sort of a work shoot type thing. That's what WWF was doing at the time. And then for the weeks later, he would proceed to go by Dustin Runnels, his real name, and he would have matches, and he would randomly show up in the crowd, and then he would do promos talking about how he was reading the Bible and how he was coming back. Now, from context, you'd assumed he was Jesus or Buddha or Tony Schiavone, whoever you worship, not my business, but you'd be wrong, because he was Goldust. Yep, old Goldust we knew and didn't quite understand was back in the WWF. Why they had him do the religious kind of talking about Jesus, not really, just kidding, just to go back to the same character in the end, I don't know. But I'm 90% sure the answer is Russo. Goldust would then acquire a fat blue fan, the former Blue Meaning, calling himself Blue Dust to take off of something he'd done in ECW as a one-off. They made this into a character, and because it was the 90s, it became a WWF television story. He would leave the WWF in May of 1999. Now, at this point, his first run with the company has been a little over 3 years. He's done so many things with the company, but the Goldust character was revolutionary. And now it was time for things to sort of, go backwards, I guess. Rhodes would then return to WCW in late 1999, but not as the Natural, not as Dustin Rhodes or Dustin Runnels or anything you've seen before. No. They had some weird ideas. By this point, Vince Russo is working for WCW. Just gonna give that a preface right now. So in late 1999, he debuts as the creepy Uncle Fester and Undertaker cosplay character Seven, which aired weeks of promos where Seven peered into the bedroom window of a small boy. Again, I'm not making this up. They were going for creepy, but it came off as the wrong kind of creepy. And even the usually tone-deaf Turner Standards and Practices realized they had a character that right out the gate looked like a pedophile. So they nixed it. But it was WCW, so they didn't just not have him show up like Hayde Vanson or a talented Bella. No, they gave him the full intro, where he seemed to float to the ring, fog, creepy music, the whole gig. Then they had him shoot and renounce the character and go back to being Dustin Rhodes. You have two guesses to pick who was in charge of WCW at the time, and hint, it wasn't Eric Bischoff, bro. Rhodes would start doing the moniker The American Nightmare, turn heel straight from the gate, but basically do nothing with the company. Not even close to what he did in the WWF as Goldust. The fun fact of this is, although he came back in late 99, he would stay with the company in one form or another until Greed, which was our last pay-per-view, teaming with his father, Dusty Rhodes, to defeat Ric Flair and Jeff Jarrett. So there's a fun fact for you. Dustin Rhodes competed in WCW's last pay-per-view before being bought. In December of 2001, Rhodes returned to the WWF yet again, returning as the Goldust character. He attacked Rob Van Dam, lost a match to him, and then went into the hardcore division because, quite frankly, everyone did at the time. He would then turn babyface, teaming with, of all people, Booker T, who actually had a very entertaining tag team. They had some very great segments, and again, if I can find some, I'm going to put some up. Really great. They played off each other really well. It was good stuff. And unfortunately, during this time, Rhodes would be a key figure in the infamous Plane Ride from Hell, where a bunch of WWE pro wrestlers on a plane acted like a bunch of pro wrestlers on a plane, where he drunkenly sang to his ex-wife Terry Runnels over the plane's PA system. His contract would expire in 2003, and Dustin Rhodes was on the Indies once again. On February 4th, 2004, he would go where many former WWE stars went, TNA. He debuted as the Lone Star Dustin Rhodes and lost to Jeff Jarrett because everyone did back then. He continued with the company until April 2005 when he decided not to renew his TNA contract because it was still TNA. In October 2005, Rhodes returned to the WWE yet again, and he would stay until June of 2006 when he was released for a no-showing appearance. And this is where, while going to WCW was creatively sort of a dark point where he sort of went nowhere, this was a personal dark point for Dustin Rhodes. And I don't delight in talking about this stuff. When I talk about controversial stuff, I don't delight in talking about it. I don't like doing it in a way that's like, oh yeah, look how awful this person is. Everyone has their struggles. Everyone has their problems. But factually, just straight up facts, this was a horrible time for him as a person. Personally, this is when he started having problems with issues, mainly alcohol. And I don't know everything. I don't know every detail, far be it from me. But this is where things started taking a turn for him. Being released for no showing, not good. That's Ultimate Warrior territory. And this is where everything was beginning to take a hold, and it started showing, not, you know, a guy who could pretty much do anything on TV. It started showing in his work, and that's not good at all. In July of 2007, Rhodes would return yet again to TNA and debut with his new split personality, Black Rain, which was like Goldust, only with black and silver, and he was 50 pounds heavier, and it looked like he was wearing a hefty bag. The gimmick was awful. He created around a rat in a cage. He had a spike-type weapon or something. They call it Darkness Falls or something like that. And it didn't help that, again, this was the height of his personal problems. He was overweight, and this is a guy who's clearly in a lot of pain as a person. Not in the best, for someone who's seen Goldust at his height, this was not Goldust at his height. This was not Dustin Rhodes in a healthy place. And then on top of that, not that you could blame them as a company, but he wasn't really put in a major position. He was put in garbage hardcore matches with guys like Abyss or Relic, which is killer spelled backwards, by the way, which Mike Tenay kept reminding us of every single match. Raven, Shark Boy, etc. Just hardcore stuff that really didn't matter, didn't mean anything. And then he just disappeared. That's it. He was off TV for 3 months, and then they released him. In October of 2008, Rhodes went back exactly to where you think he went and re-signed with the WWE. He was last a performer and an agent until May of 2012. So now it's about 3 years, a little over 3 years. Not bad for another run. He would do some time in the Indies before in 2014, blah, blah, blah. He teams with brother Cody Rhodes to make a good tag team. That would be until Cody, now under the gimmick Stardust, that he hated but somehow was so damn good at, turned on Goldust and the two began feuding. Around this time, Dustin suggested the two have a blow-off match at WrestleMania, but Vince McMahon gave it about as much thought as pretty much anything anyone else gives him, and decided that their blow-off should be at the Fastlane pay-per-view in February 2015. He would then be in the Andre the Giant Battle Royal, and was eliminated by Ryback. Way better. In 2016, he would form yet another entertaining tag team with WWE superstar and future hide-and-seek world champion R-Truth, comprising the team The Golden Truth. And these two guys were great together. Two lower card mid guys who weren't going out there they weren't going to win the tag belts, but they were entertaining all the same. Think the Fashion Police with experience. Goldust would eventually turn on R-Truth because we can't have nice things, and the two would later feud. Then he worked a match with Bray Wyatt down the line, and then for a bit they had it where he would come out to Goldust. He would come out as the Goldust music, but he wouldn't wear the face paint. I don't know why. I have no idea. Then on March 28, 2019, after 6 years of just this tenure with the company, Dustin Rhodes asked for his release from WWE yet again. He would go on to face his brother Cody again, this time at AEW's Double or Nothing pay-per-view, putting on a match that, considering he's 50 years old, had no right to be near as good as it was. And that's the career of Dustin Rhodes. From the Natural to Goldust to Black Rain to Dustin Rhodes yet again, this is a career that has lasted 31 years and still going. He has a match team with Cody against the super kick-happy Young Bucks at AEW Fight for the Fallen event on July 13th. He's still going. He's still wrestling. He's 50 years old, and he has another match coming up. So we're talking about a career that is not over. So what's his legacy? First, it'll be Goldust. The first part of his legacy, whenever you think Dustin Rhodes, will be Goldust. Any wrestling fan is going to know who Goldust is. It was a revolutionary gimmick. It's times pushed the envelope. Some would argue maybe a little too far. Maybe it's not the greatest gimmick to look back on and say, oh, maybe that was stuff was too far. Maybe that wouldn't fly today. And they're right. It wouldn't. But it was the Attitude Era before the Attitude Era. It was a time where a dentist could beat a garbage man while a race car driver watched on a monitor backstage. And yet here was Goldust putting it all to shame. He lasted through the Attitude Era and even pushed the envelope during that in a time where that didn't even seem possible. At one point, he even wanted to get breast implants for the character. Now that's commitment and crazy. Commitment and crazy. Then of course there's longevity. 31 plus years in a business where some guys don't make it 10 is amazing. And it's not like he's limping around there throwing crappy punches while his opponents run into his weak chops. This guy is still out there kicking ass all these years later. So when you talk about a character, when you talk about a professional wrestler with longevity, who's able to still get out there and put on a 20-30 minute match at a solid rate like Dustin Rhodes, it's hard not to say that while he was never world champion, while he was never he was never, a top guy like Stone Cold Steve Austin or The Rock or Shawn Michaels or Hulk Hogan. There's top guys like that. He was never one of those, but he's a solid performer who kicked butt, who was able to last, again, 31 years in this business and still work at a high level and go through different characters, go ups and downs like everyone does, but to be able to do all of it and still be memorable and still to every time. I mean, right now, I'm not saying they are, but down the line, WWE could hire him back as Goldust and he'd come out through that curtain and A, get a really good pop, and B, work a really good match. How many people can say that? How many people can you say that have been in this business over 30 years? How many people did a gimmick from 1996, could come out tomorrow and still get a good pop and still put on a good match at the same level that they were years ago? Not many. I'd argue that very few. So the legacy of Dustin Rhodes is one of longevity, creativity, quite frankly, just an amazing talent. And I think that as wrestling fans, I think we give him enough credit. I don't know about enough credit, but we give him a lot of credit. I don't think mainstream fans truly understand what they have, how great Dustin Rhodes was. So that's why I want to do this. I just literally thought of this topic one morning. I was just waking up and I thought of this topic and I think, you know what? It's relevant. It's topical because, like I said, he still has another match coming up. He's still going to be wrestling, probably working behind the scenes at AEW, but he's also a guy that could call on at any moment and have a really good match. So I have to give him credit. So that's the career of Dustin Rhodes. It's continuing on, and you know what? Good job, and he's an amazing talent. Not that he needs to hear it from me. I'm just a fan, but hey, he's a really great talent, and I've enjoyed the career so far. So, and I'm enjoying what's going on and looking forward to anything in the future. Well, that's gonna do it for this time, folks. Again, if you have any ideas for topics on future episodes, anything you want to add, any ideas, send them to me, send them to the page, send me a message on the page, comment below the videos. I don't care. Whatever you want to do. I have some other, like I said, I've got a couple episodes in the can already that I'm waiting on that I'm going to put out, but I've got some really cool ideas. But yeah, I want to hear your ideas, hear your comments, tell me I suck, death threats, whatever you want to do. Do what you got to do. I'll be here listening to them. Until next time, my name's Dan, this Exploder. Have a good one.